Okay, right. So back to Macduff. So Macduff is a loyal, true, heroic soldier. So he shows the audience how awful Macbeth is because the first thing he says is, "Oh, horror, horror, horror." Shows how what a terrible situation it is. The exclamatives here shows that regicide is a crime. He says most sacrilegious murder. It's against God, religion, and Christianity. Okay, so Macduff reflects the audience's perception, the kind of the audience of the time would think this was absolutely terrible. And they talk about ring the alarm, awake, awake, awake. This is horror, Balcom Banquo. This is treason. That is actually a bell. So there's lots of dramatic irony here. When Macduff says, "Oh, gentle lady, it's not for you to hear what I can speak." So he perceives her to be powerless, like a typical woman, but actually she is instrumental in this murder. So Lady Macbeth again shows her deception because she says, "What in our house?" So Macbeth then says that he had to kill the guards. For Duncan, again, this language that he uses to say that he did this for Duncan shows his deception as well. Now, Malcolm and Donalbain, they are worried and they don't know what to do, so they decide to run away. They say there's daggers in men's smiles. Okay, so they say there's daggers in men's smiles, they're traitors, and a lot of people are thinking, did the sons do it? So a lovely image there, daggers in men's smiles. They're kind of worried again by the falsehood, the deception of people around. So Malcolm goes off to England and Donalbain to Ireland. So split up. However, Macbeth capitalises on this and says that it is done, that this is a sign of their guilt. So Ross and Macduff talk and they say that Macbeth will be king. And they say Malcolm and Donalbain, they've run away and this makes them more suspicious. And Banquo is then a little bit... Then the next thing is when we're in Act 3. So that's the murder, it's done. Macbeth's going to be king. And then we have Banquo enter. Now the interesting thing is that Banquo enters, he's a little soliloquy and he worries that Macbeth has played most foully. So he's done something wrong. Now, Macbeth is going to have a banquet. Act 3 is the banquet act. That's where they have their feast. And Banquo's the chief guest. Now, this little scene before, again, shows Macbeth's deception. He says to Banquo, "You must come along to the banquet." However, what he is worried about is, he says here, he's fearful of Banquo's loyalty to Duncan. And he is worried about the prophecies of the witches. And he's really worried that any children of his will not succeed the crown. So therefore, he needs to remove the seed of Banquo's kings. So he needs to remove them for Banquo, for his children to be king. So this is the first stage in Macbeth's kind of downfall, because he starts to use his power as king to commit murders. This is his first stage of him becoming a tyrant, a cruel leader. And even though he's just spoken so lovely, in a kind of like in a way that shows his friendship with Banquo, he orders the murders of Banquo and Fleance, and we see his cowardliness. He doesn't do it himself; he uses other people to commit the murders. So he's open and honest about betraying his friends, and he does this. Now, he says that Macbeth says that he has some fears and this will kind of solve them. Now, the next scene, which is Act 3, Scene 2, is in the palace. And this is the scene which shows Macbeth's fears. So he says, "We scorched the snake and not killed it." So he's got fears. He's mental conflict. He's got terrible dreams that shake his nightly. They torture the mind. And he can't sleep as well. And Lady Macbeth says, "Come on, pull yourself together." And he's kind of saying, make our faces visits to our hearts. He's in power. He's saying to Lady Macbeth, "Come on, let's do that false faith. Let's kind of put on a brave face to this. We will be able to do it." Now, he confides in her and she says, "You must leave this. And there's my lovely picture. And he says, "Full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. You know that Banquo and Fleance lives." Okay. So he's feeling incredibly worried, and he tries to hide his plan from Lady Macbeth. So this full of scorpions is my mind is a metaphor for his mental conflict, and it mirrors Act 1, Scene 5 as well. So the language here mirrors Act 1, Scene 5. He calls upon the spirits. He says, "Come, seal and night. Light thickens," similar to Lady Macbeth's language. And interestingly, after here, he becomes a little bit stronger. But before then, you've got the banquet scene, Act 3, Scene 4. We just before this, we learn that Banquo dies, is killed, and Fleance gets away. That's an important plot point. And then we've got the banquet scene. I always think the banquet scene represents Macbeth's fear and guilt. When he realises that Fleance has escaped, Macbeth changes. He said he had been perfect, but now he's cabined, cribbed, confined, and bound in saucy doubts and fears. So he's experiencing mental conflict. He's obsessed with the witch's prophecies. He was strong and solid, but now these verbs show that he has changed. And he kind of uses this metaphor that Banquo's dead, but the worm that's fled will kind of turn into a snake and with venom poison them, because he knows that Fleance will want revenge. Then we've got the banquet scene where he sees the ghost. It's a really dramatic moment, and he says, "Thou cannot say I did it, never shake thy glory, thy gory locks at me." So we've got this image of blood, the blood here signifying guilt. It's a really public scene because Macbeth is seen as insane. So Lady Macbeth says, "This is just a painting of your fear. It's not real. You're just seeing things." And she says, "Shame itself." So she does her usual thing about insulting him. And she kind of says, "Are you a man?" as well. It calms down. The ghost of Banquo vanishes. But he drinks the Banquo, but he sees Banquo because he knows how good and loyal he is. He knows that he will turn up because he invited him to the banquet. So it's his guilty conscience that's creating this illusion. He then says, like, it will have blood. They say blood will have blood. So he realises that that this is just going to kind of lead to more and more conflict. And he says, I'm in blood so deep. I'm in blood steeped so far that I should wade no more. So Macbeth is trapped in evil. He can't move. He's kind of stuck in this kind of future that he's created for himself. And he's tormented by his sleep. He says, my strange and self-abuse initiate the fear that wants hard use. So he's tormented. He cannot sleep. He's lost his innocence. And now this is the change because he becomes even more tyrannical. So after this, we've got the witches scene. We've got Act 4, Scene 1. Interestingly, you've got the goddess of witchcraft. You've got a long scene with the goddess of witchcraft. She's kind of a little bit angry, but she wants to help. She wants to corrupt Macbeth. Okay, she wants to trade on Macbeth. And they say that it openly says that they're manipulating Macbeth. Again, causing dramatic irony because he doesn't realise this. Now, in Act 4, he is just called a tyrant. So Macbeth tried to frame Fleance for Banquo's murder. And now people are starting to find out. They keep calling him a tyrant. They kind of know what's going on as well. So we've got this idea that he's only been referred to as a tyrant. Then we've got... Act 4, Scene 1. So sorry, that was Act 3. Then we've got Act 4, Scene 1. You've got lots of examples of the witches disrupting the natural order, trying to gain control of Macbeth. So they're also trying to gain control of Macbeth as well. And interestingly, they refer to him as something wicked. This way comes. Now that's really interesting because it signifies the change. They don't say, oh, hail Macbeth. They now refer to him as wicked. So he is now like the witches. Now he uses lots of commanding language, pronouns, answer me. He wants to know even more, though he knows they are evil. So we then see the apparitions. First of all, we see an armed head, and it says, beware Macduff. We then, he's really grateful to the witches. Oh, thank you. Thanks. Then they see a bloody child. It says none of womankind will harm Macbeth. He feels invincible. He says, I don't have to fear Macduff, but I'm going to kill him anyway. So he kills when he does not need to. And he says, Macbeth shall never be vanquished until Great Burnham Wood comes to Dunsinane Hill. So he still asks more questions, and they say, seek to know more. And he curses the witches, and it shows his evil side, because he says, an eternal curse fall on you. Now, because he wants to know more, they show him his worst nightmare, really. He calls it a horrible sight, because he learns that Banquo will have 8 generations of kings. And there's a lot of references to sight. See. But he doesn't see clearly. He doesn't really realise that he's seeing the future. He tries to overpower it by killing some more. Okay, so he curses the witches. Ironically, he curses the witches infected by... He's really angered by this image. So he curses the witches and those that follow him. And it creates irony, because that's actually him as well. Okay, so he's decided that he's going to kill all of Macduff's family. So this is his actions being a cruel tyrant. He's incredibly angry, because he's kind of like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take action. I am going to try and seek power through violence. So this play is about violence and the theme of violence, and he's using violence to gain and secure more power. So the next scene is the scene of the murder of Macduff's family. Now, it's an interesting scene, because Lady Macduff is actually... she thinks Macduff is a traitor for leaving, because he's gone off to England, and Ross tries to convince her of the truth, that Macduff is actually good. He's trying to kind of save the day and be the hero. And there's a little interaction between her and the son. I think the main thing about this is that they're killed. So the murderer kills the son and then kills Lady Macduff later on as well. But it just shows his cruelty. Now, the next scene is in England. So this is how Malcolm and Macduff are going to bring down Macbeth. But first of all, Malcolm is a sign of a true king, because he gives an impression that he is not a good man. He kind of says lots of lies to Macduff. So remember, Malcolm is the king's son, and Macduff is trying to convince him that he's a good man, that he is kind of here to protect the country. So Macduff says things like, oh, bleed, bleed, poor country, poor tyranny. I think our country... And he kind of is he kind of says like, oh, horrid hell, can a devil more damned in evils to top Macbeth? He kind of is really showing that he cares about Macbeth, and he kind of says things like, oh, Scotland. Now, Macduff shows that his true loyalty is to Scotland, not to anybody. So this means that he is a true hero. So they kind of join forces. They call him Devilish Macbeth. And together we've got the chance of goodness. They're going to try and restore the true king to the throne. So after this scene, you've got... the fact that Malcolm and Edward are examples of good kings. They are linked to the divine right of kings. And we've got this... Macduff doesn't know that his family have been killed yet, so we've got some more dramatic irony. They keep calling him a tyrant, that they need to fight Macbeth, and they convince the King of England to do that. Now, when Macduff finds out that Macbeth is a tyrant, he's committed loads of needless murders, he's a true hero, because he says that I must feel this as a man. He says that sinful Macduff, he takes responsibility for this. However, he realises he doesn't feel guilty in the same way Macbeth does. He doesn't feel guilty because he didn't do anything wrong. He respected the natural order. Okay, so after this, Malcolm, Macduff and King Edward, they use the gods above to kind of give them kind of hope to go and fight Macbeth. Then that's Act 4. So Act 4 is all about like the battle between Macduff and Macbeth, and the fact that Macduff is getting the army together with Malcolm to fight Macbeth. Then we've got Act 5, the final act. We're nearly there. And this is, it starts off with Lady Macbeth. This is her guilt scene. Last time we saw her was in the banquet scene. She was quite secure then in her emotions. And in Act 2, she said, a little water clears of this deed. But now the guilt has overpowered her. So she's sleepwalking, she's got strange behaviour, and she's holding this little candle to try and protect her from evil and from hell. Okay, so she's holding a candle. But then she sees blood on her hands, and she says, out damn blood, out damn spot, out I say. And the exclamatives show her anxiety. And she talks about hell. Hell is murky, and she's kind of worried about going there. So she kind of says, the Thane of Fife had a wife, where is she now? And she's wondering about Lady Macbeth. So one of the things she's obsessed by is, what is Macbeth doing? You know, what is he doing? Now, the thing is that she's telling people, or she's talking about it here. So we've got this idea that, you know, she knows she's committed wrong. The doctor knows that too. And she knows that she's kind of having judgment there as well. The public confession that she's making shows that she's committed regicide, which is a terrible, terrible thing. She uses hyperbole. Will all the perfumes of Arabia not sweeten this hand? It's got a bit of hyperbole. And the doctor said, this disease is beyond my practice. So when she goes to bed, we hear the knocking again. There's a knocking at my gate. Come, come, come. 4 times. Give me your hand. What's done cannot be undone. Go to bed. So there's a reference to hell. So the doctor kind of says that repeats are natural. They've committed loads of sin, and the only thing left to do is to kind of hope that God will kind of make things better. Now, the next few scenes is just Macbeth, is the battle. You've got the English army and the Scottish rebels. They're getting closer. They call Macbeth a dwarfish. Macbeth is a dwarfish thief. That he's wearing a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief. So he's kind of in the wrong clothes. He's not really a king. Macbeth still believes the witch's words. All right, so he's not worried. He's angry. His language is really different. He says things like, geese, villain, go prick thy face and overread thy fear. Never sag with doubt or shake with fear. He's really confident. He believes he can't be brought down. Then Macbeth is told about Lady Macbeth being sick, and he just says cure of that. But he's more concerned about himself. So we've got these kind of backwards and forward scenes. We've got the army getting closer and closer. We've got Birnam Wood. We've got the plan for Birnam Wood to get closer and closer. The witch's prophecies are coming true. Now, he says that I've almost forgotten the taste of fear. In Act 2, Scene 2, he's scared of everything. But now he's got no morals or no conscience. We then learn that Lady Macbeth is dead, and he feels like life is pointless. Okay, and he thinks that he's given up on life. Repetition shows he's given up hope. Life is futile. Life is pointless. What's the point? They've achieved nothing. They've gained all this power but achieved nothing. So Shakespeare's using this idea that committing regicide won't result in glory. You will just have this temporary glory that will mean nothing. And he only really realises the witch's deception right here, right at the end, in Act 5, Scene 6. And he says, like, to doubt the equivocation of the fiend that lies like the truth. He says, the witches have lied to me. I've only just realised this. And he says, ring the alarm bell, blow, wind, come rack. And he's almost kind of becoming spirit-like there because he's trying to control the weather. Now, this is just then his downfall. Macbeth kills Malcolm's cousin, and Macduff calls him a hellhound, a dog of hell. They have a little argument, but Macbeth decides to fight one last time. He realises his flaw, and he tries to regain his reputation to be a tragic hero. Now, Macduff is the hero. He kills him. He's the one with that's competent with the sword, and he brings his head in to show that he is a villain. And right at the end, Malcolm becomes king. So we restore the natural order. So right at the end, order and Christianity is restored. Natural order is back in place. And we've got this summary of this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen. So a sum up of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth and how terrible they are. That is a very quick journey through. Hope it helps.